how the heck did they know so much about what we were going through, or how badly I needed to achieve this goal, or how did they know what was stressing me out, causing me to lose sleep and caused me to have missed time away from my family. So if your leads are not currently having that reaction, it's time to step it up on the empathy, on walking a mile or kilometer or 10 miles or in their shoes. Get closer to your customers, get closer to your prospects, so you understand what kind of value they need from your company throughout the full buyer's journey. Because again, if we get in early, we have a really unique opportunity to shape the purchase criteria. If we don't get in early, the only thing, if we manage to get found at the end, that's going to sway them is cheaper. We don't want to be in the business of cheaper, right? So we need to get in early. We need to be able to demonstrate our unique differentiation, our values, what we do that no one else in the field is doing, and how we are uniquely positioned to help them. Hello, data center friends from around the globe. Good afternoon, good morning, maybe it's even good evening, wherever you're joining us from. I am Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute. We are all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals in the growth of the data center industry. And it doesn't matter whether you're joining us from a data center operator, like in co-location, wholesale, hyperscale, edge, or modular, or maybe you work with or work for a company that sells to or partners with data centers, like a technology or facilities company, or from construction or real estate, or maybe even some facet of outsourced sales and marketing. But I want to very cordially welcome you to today's webinar on Data Center Lead Generation 301. And for a real treat, if you're serious about improving how you go about generating leads, nurturing, educating, building trust with those leads, accelerating those into sales opportunities, and closing those sales much more efficiently. Over the next 30 minutes, I would encourage you to absorb everything that we're going to be talking about. Everyone that is registered for today's webinar will be getting a copy of today's webinar. One, because I'm going to be going at a pretty fast pace. And second, because it is incredibly important for you to get alignment across your company when it comes to anything and everything having to do with data center lead generation, go to market, all of this, incredibly, incredibly important. So if having this recording, having access to this kind of recording helps you as a conversation starter, I would for sure encourage you to utilize that. Again, I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI. I help companies in and around the data center industry get found much earlier on in the buyer's journey, differentiate, achieve trusted advisor status, and command premium pricing power so they can drive sustained, profitable revenue growth. You may have seen me present educational sessions at some of the industry's most popular conferences. I've served on boards of some local and national organizations in and around data center infrastructure. I'm a former IBM and Microsoft contractor. I was heavily involved in the HubSpot channel partner ecosystem for the better part of a decade and co-led a HubSpot user group for about 4 years. I'm a huge believer in user communities as a great way to build your relationships and grow your business. I bring more than 20 years of experience in and around enterprise IT, small and mid-size IT, enterprise support, including co-location and wholesale, construction, cooling, cybersecurity, decommissioning, asset disposition and recycling, 15 years in managed services. That's how I began my career, originally as a value-added reseller and computer consultant in the space. I've worked with dozens of software companies and SaaS companies, including in infrastructure management and building management, as well as in telecommunications. And again, DCSMI is all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals in the growth of the data center industry. Whenever I do a webinar like this, I want to make sure that we deliver as much value as possible. So we always ask on the registration form, what's your biggest sales and marketing challenge? Following today's formal portion of today's webinar, I'll be holding an informal Q&A session where I'll kick that off with answering some of the top questions that were sent in ahead of time, including challenges around lead generation, market entry, brand awareness, strategic high value sales, co-location engagement, and getting to decision makers. So what is on the agenda for today when it comes to data center lead generation 101? We're first going to start by making sure that we're on the same page with the basics, with the right foundation, by recapping some of the highlights from the 2 earlier sessions that I held recently, Data Center Lead Generation 101 and 201. We'll talk about how to make sure you're using the right terminology to align in your company, that you're making sure that you're talking about leads as leads and sales opportunities as sales opportunities and not mixing up the two. We'll look at what you need to do to transform the right strangers into known leads so you can build a relationship with them over time, stay with them through the full buyer's journey so they eventually become your clients and raving fans that help you bring even more clients and raving fans into your fold as you grow your business. We'll look at if you need to be rebooting your positioning to adjust to industry realities and buyer preferences. We'll talk about how to exchange value when it comes to your lead generation process, especially how to deposit into the relationship account. And then we'll wrap up today by talking for a few minutes about how to turn your website into a lead generation factory for the AI factory era. Jensen Huang from NVIDIA and Michael Dell are talking about how we're building AI factories in traditional data centers. So why not have a lead generation factory that can function side by side to help you grow your business? So a quick recap based on the foundations based on Data Center Lead Generation 101. Jensen Huang, CEO of NVIDIA, is incredibly bullish, as are dozens of people in similar kinds of companies as NVIDIA, and is specifically forecasting that more than $1 trillion in data center upgrades are going to be happening over the next 4 years, starting with the hyperscalers and filtering on down to the rest of the industry. Jensen Huang's friend, Michael Dell, no stranger to the IT industry, probably one of the OGs that's been around since the 1980s at this point, is still leading Dell Technology, is very equally bullish on the data center industry and predicts that we're going to see a 100-fold increase in data center demand over the next 10 years. However, unfortunately, not all of these gains are going to be distributed evenly. Why is that? Because we're in an era where buyer preferences have changed a lot. These were especially accelerated in those 2 years when many people were staying home a ton. And we've gotten very used to the idea now of getting things exactly when we want, how we want, and 100% on our own terms. Very self-service driven. We don't necessarily like to talk to humans anymore when we can do things on our own. What you see up there, that slide, is Gartner found that this is so much of an issue that now 83% of a typical buyer's journey, researching, comparing options, and evaluating pricing, now happens before sales contact. This is a huge deal. And it's a big change over the past decade or so, because if we were having this webinar back 10 years ago, that number was about 56%. At the time the research was originally done by CEB, the corporate executive board that's now part of Gartner. I think they were doing the research sponsored or in part with Sirius Decisions and Salesforce. And at the time, they found that about 56% of a typical journey was over before sales contact. Now it's 83%, and it's accelerating even faster. What that means is if you work on a go-to-market team, if you work on marketing, sales, customer success, product, or channel partnerships, you need to work extra hard to figure out a way to stay relevant going forward in a world where so many of your prospects have an enormous aversion to spending time with sales teams, especially in the early and middle part of their research and decision-making process. And this isn't just outliers. McKinsey found 70 to 80% of people now have these preferences. LinkedIn, working with Edelman, has done similar research on this. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in today's webinar. But the way you can cut through the noise is great educational content that educates and builds trust. And a key part of unlocking this is getting super specific about who you're creating this content for. What you see on the screen there is an example buyer persona, like a blueprint of what a CTO would care about, CTO, CIO, Oscar. And not only the job titles and certifications and identifiers, but the biggest goals and challenges that Oscar needs to achieve in his job and the things that are stressing him out. And we know if you're trying to get the attention of a CFO or a COO, they're going to care about different goals and they're going to care about different challenges. So we need to be super specific about who we want to generate these leads from. Maybe you're selling to co-location CEOs of small or mid-size or even relatively large co-location CEOs. Again, each one of these segments cares about pretty different sets of goals and challenges. So the more you can resonate with the conversation that's already going on in their mind, the more likely that you're going to be invited in. And it's absolutely vital that we get invited in and earn a seat at the table as early on in the buyer's journey as possible, so we can stay with them throughout awareness when they know they have a goal or a challenge they're trying to figure out, in consideration when they're starting to compare all the different options that are in front of them and in the decision stage. Most of the companies that I speak with in the data center industry that aren't really up to best practices on this and aren't really competitive are doing a little bit in decision stage, but they're usually completely zoned out in awareness and consideration. And that's an enormous problem, because that's when you have the biggest opportunity to be the ones educating and building trust as a subject matter expert, as a thought leader, as a trusted advisor, as a teacher. When you have a chance to dramatically influence and shape their purchase criteria that they use to evaluate all of the different options that are in front of them. And if you do a great job with this, you're largely guaranteed to stay on the short list. If you do a phenomenal job like this in some edge cases, not just edge data centers, but edge cases, you may actually be the entire shortlist, meaning that your content and events and how you've done lead generation has successfully neutralized competitors. How many touch points do you need to have? A typical journey, usually a couple dozen touch points, like 28 touch points between complete stranger and a purchase decision, between awareness and awareness, consideration, and decision. If you think about a natural breakdown with that, you have maybe need 12 touch points in awareness, 11 touch points in consideration, 5 touch points in decision when they get to sales contact. Amazing. If you're doing great events, if you're doing great field marketing, you probably are covering 1 or 2 or maybe 3 touch points. But my question for you is, what about the other 24 or 25 needs to stay in front of those buyers throughout their full buyer's journey that are going to dramatically shape the purchase? Because again, many companies are really not even doing a great job in decision stage. But by attending today's webinar, you're taking a really important first step in making sure that you're able to deploy Data Center Lead Generation 301. So if you're looking to modernize your lead generation strategy, some best practices is think about how you convert complete strangers who've landed on your website into leads. How can you make it all about them with a relentless focus on what's most important to the decision makers and the team of people that works for or adjacent to the decision makers? And what can you do by using the awareness of your segments, of your segmentation, as well as where they are in the journey to accelerate the sales cycle by anticipating what they're going to want to know next to help you close larger sales? So one of the most important areas to close the gap on is I see a lot of people that use leads and sales opportunities interchangeably. And that's an enormous problem if you need to collaborate with other people in your company, especially in marketing, and if you need to collaborate with external companies, with marketing partners or channel partners. So really, really important to understand that lead and opportunity are 2 very different things. Leads typically happen in the awareness stage. Opportunities usually happen more in the late stage, in the decision stage. Most CRM platforms, especially like HubSpot and Salesforce, and most good CRM platforms, are very focused on helping you keep track of the persona, like the segment that they're in, as well as the life cycle stage, where they are in the relationship with your company. So they might move from lead to marketing qualified lead to sales qualified lead, sometimes called sales accepted lead. When a human from the sales department has reviewed it and says, yep, this one looks pretty good. Opportunity is where someone from your sales team has met with them and determined that, yep, this one looks pretty good. They definitely are showing signs that they need what we have. I can forecast a close date. I can forecast a deal size. Yep, it's an opportunity. Let's put it up on the deals board. And then some of those close into customers, and some of those customers that are super thrilled become evangelists. So again, it's really, really important to make sure that you're not confusing the terminology here. Strangers become leads through an interaction with your company, usually because they filled out a form on your website, or they've engaged with a live chat or a chat bot or something like that on your site, or maybe if they're really, really strange and living in the past, maybe they've actually picked up the phone and called your company. That still does happen once in a blue moon, but that's another way that someone can become a lead. And of course, the place that most in data center sales, marketing, go to market absolutely love in the data center industry is leads that are generated at events. And they can be fantastic, but just remember that's 1 or 2 touch points. It's not all 28 touch points. You need a way to fill the gaps and stay with them throughout the full buyer's journey. Again, a lead can be promoted to marketing qualified when it merits attention to your sales team. That's usually done on the marketing side. And a marketing qualified lead becomes sales qualified or sales accepted when typically a human from your sales team looks at it and says, looks pretty good. So if you want to engage prospects with more intentional lead generation, your company should use tools that connect marketing and sales together. If you're using different platforms, they're not integrated, they don't talk well together, it can be really, really difficult to get this right. But it's super important that you're able to segment leads based on who they are. Are they a CTO? Are they a network operations center manager? Are they a facilities manager? Are they a chief cybersecurity? It really depends on the nature of your business model and who you sell to. But it's super important when you capture these leads to be able to have an idea of who they are and where they are in their relationship with your company.
The Data Center Go-to-Market podcast is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website that can be found at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that URL is www.dcsmi.com.
Next up, we want to talk about what we can do to transform complete strangers that have never before heard of your company into leads. And one of the most important facets of that is that we keep in mind that nearly half of decision makers now spend at least an hour a week consuming thought leadership content. This can be print content, audio content, video content. It can be live. It can be recordings. It can be the full recording. It can be segments of the recording. It can be shorts. But LinkedIn, working with Edelman, the giant PR firm, found that thought leaders are now spending about half of thought leaders are now spending at least an hour a week consuming thought leadership content. And at least half of those say that thought leadership is for sure influencing their purchase decisions. However, most people that are consuming this content don't think very highly of it. Like only 15% say the thought leadership they've consumed is excellent. So this leaves an enormous gap for someone like yourself, someone like your team, your company to step in and knock it out of the park. Remember, the leads that you're going to want most, if you're very situationally aware of your ideal client profile and your buyer personas and how you rank and prioritize those buyer personas, the leads that you're going to want most are going to be at the intersection of a specific kind of person and a specific stage in the buyer's journey or life cycle with your company. And there's a difference between buyer's journey and life cycle stage. But again, just be aware that there's different stages that people go through in between how they navigate their research and purchase decisions. And we need to be very well aware of that if we want to be competitive with lead generation best practices in the data center industry. Super important highlighter here is that anyone can purchase a lead list, anyone can scrape websites. However, when you think about doing that, what percentage of people on those lists are remotely interested in jumping into your late stage sales process right now? If you think it's pretty high, go talk to some representative people and see how they feel about this. And also think about how you feel like this when your inbox and your LinkedIn messages and other forms of interruption are constantly badgering you to take a meeting about things that you just don't care about, or a small percentage of them you might care about, but it's weeks or months away before you're even concentrating on that. So be super careful of thinking that purchase lists or scrape lists are going to immediately solve this gap. Can be useful to build account-based marketing lists when you're really tight on your ideal client profile, but you got to do the homework first of getting really tight about defining who the company is and who are the individual stakeholders that you want to build these relationships with. Your company really needs to have a laser focus on its resources, on the people in the companies where you can predictably, cost effectively, and expeditiously deliver irrefutable customer success. This is always about reverse engineering. It's looking at where you've been most successful with your best clients, with your best customers, with your best partners, and building a go-to-market playbook, building an engine to help you replicate and clone that. To get from strangers to known leads, you want them to really have a deep, visceral, emotional reaction when they come across your content of like, how the heck did they know so much about what we were going through, or how badly I needed to achieve this goal, or how did they know what was stressing me out, causing me to lose sleep and caused me to have missed time away from my family. So if your leads are not currently having that reaction, it's time to step it up on the empathy, on walking a mile or kilometer or 10 miles or in their shoes. Get closer to your customers, get closer to your prospects, so you understand what kind of value they need from your company, throughout the full buyer's journey. Because again, if we get in early, we have a really unique opportunity to shape the purchase criteria. If we don't get in early, the only thing, if we manage to get found at the end, that's going to sway them is cheaper. We don't want to be in the business of cheaper, right? So we need to get in early. We need to be able to demonstrate our unique differentiation, our values, what we do that no one else in the field is doing, and how we are uniquely positioned to help them. So think about how effective your website is at converting anonymous visitors into leads so you can begin a relationship and educate and build trust with them over time. Because in most cases, if you're only showing up with lead generation offers at the decision stage, you're pretty much screaming from the rooftop that anyone that fills out this form is going to be hopefully immediately contacted by sales, but most people aren't ready for sales contact. There's like 90% of people who could be a good fit a couple weeks or a couple months from now, but if you badger the heck out of them insisting on sales contact now, you will alienate them in much the same way that an obnoxious car salesperson can do the same thing in a showroom. If you point out that it's pretty early on, you're not buying for a couple weeks or a couple months, and they insist on trying to find a way to high pressure you into closing. The companies that have been doing this well have content that educates and builds trust. It frames what people should be looking for because you're able to think a couple steps ahead of where they are and provides unique insight. So how do you make sure that you're ready to do this? Do you need to rethink what you do with positioning? For the better part of a decade now, I've been talking about these 5 building blocks, the 5 pillars for revenue growth, including differentiation, thought leadership, content, competitive positioning, sales cycle acceleration, which is, again, the huge difference between leads and sales opportunities. And at the risk of getting a little bit meta, your webinar program and your email marketing can do wonders for sales cycle acceleration when you truly understand what it is that they're looking to achieve and what it is that is stressing your prospects out that they need to solve. And all of this rolls into scalable, predictable revenue growth. If you're just depending on cold email for outbound lead generation, and you're not really thinking of where people are in their buyer's journey, and instead you're guessing where they are and you're assuming where you'd actually like them to be, it can be really, really hard. So if you're going to do cold emailing, make sure that you do your homework, learn about what the company is doing from their company page, learn about what that individual is doing from their profile, especially looking at their activity, their employment section, and of course, visit the company's website, homepage, look at the about page, the news page, figure out what's actually going on so you can make sure that your email is relevant to who this individual is, how they fit in with their team, how that team fits in with the rest of the company. You can bring up these trigger events, but in the world where so many people are using AI cold email generation, outbound email generation, it's not particularly novel to mention a blog post or an ebook or a industry event that they were at, or joining a new company, or winning the award. So this authenticity, with air quotes around authenticity, may have been a differentiator 5 or 10 years ago, but you're going to have to go a little next level to stand out now. Because if you don't want to be positioned as a car salesperson, if you want to be positioned as an industry expert, if you want to come across more as a Big Four consultant, like $1,000 an hour or local currency equivalent consultants from like someone that works for Deloitte or PwC or EY or KPMG, and isn't just focused on closing a transaction, is really, really important to step up what you do with your lead generation. Can selling be a noble profession? It really depends on how you do it right. No one needs you to read the website to them anymore. It's really not about closing them. It's about guiding your best prospects through their research and comparing options and evaluation of the different options that are in front of them and guiding them. And when it comes to decision by committee, which we all know in any kind of mid-market and enterprise is probably the most important skill set of all, it's a lot like being a project manager and helping to build consensus and guiding and coaching your internal champion. Because in a digitally transformed world where your prospects have access to an absurd amount of information on search, social, review websites, webinars like this, videos, voice search, LLM, large language model, fed chatbots, you really, really have to go next level. So what can we do to exchange value to put our deposits into the relationship bank account? It really depends on how well you empathize with their struggles and goals of your most important personas throughout the full buyer's journey. The value exchange that you ask for when you're trying to generate leads needs to be proportional to the value of your offer. Like, you probably, if you spend time with folks on your marketing team, you'll hear your marketers talk about the idea of premium content. This is content that's so good that you can justify putting it behind a landing page in a form and actually using it for lead generation. Like you can see up there on the screen, there's a landing page for an ebook on the 22 data center technologies that go-to-market professionals need to learn about. There's a headline, a promise. There's a video above the fold. We know people like to watch things, not read anymore. There's copywriting. There's a form. There's bullet points with details about what, with page number references on what they're going to learn. But just as value is inherently subjective, premium content gets created for an individual persona for a reason, because people care about different stuff. Intentionally created premium content focuses on one buyer persona at a time and one buyer's journey at a time. So it almost, if you have three buyer personas, like a CTO, a managed service provider, or a co-location person, you'll end up with a tic-tac-toe board, essentially, where you need to fill 9 boxes for 3 stages of the journey and 3 different kinds of buyers. Content formats, it really depends on their preferences. You never know unless you test, like downloadables like ebooks, reports, papers, checklist templates. Webinars are huge. Repurposing webinars are huge. All kinds of tools. But again, look to exchange value, put deposits into the relationship account before you try to extract that. So with that in mind, what needs to happen on your website for data center lead generation 101 to really kick into gear? It's important when you're collaborating with anyone else on your team to build a growth engine around lead generation that you're aware of the different kinds of pages that go on a website and their role in influencing lead generation. There's website pages, landing pages, and blog posts. They typically live within a content management system, a CMS. If your company does not have a content management system, it's really hard to be world-class when it comes to content. So that's one of the first recommendations. If you don't have a content management system that makes it easy for your marketing team and your product marketers and your channel marketers and potentially folks in sales, whatever it is, to be able to make routine updates to certain specific parts of the site, that's for sure something you want to address. Website pages typically focus on decision stage. Blog posts usually are early on, or awareness stage, and landing pages are what help to convert anonymous visitors into leads. Here you can see an example on the left of a website page. You can see a blog post in the middle and a landing page on the right. On the surface, they may look similar, but they serve very different purposes for lead generation. And typically your website pages and your blog posts lead to landing pages with forms that do the actual lead generation. In terms of forms, within forms, they have different contact properties. Forms best practices dictate that there's a headline promising some value. There's usually one or more contact properties that help to establish who they are, where they come from, what they care about, and some kind of button that says, yep, sounds good, I'm in. What you can see up there on the screen is a webinar registration form with the first, last email address, what's your biggest challenge, how'd you hear about us, add-on to newsletter, and then a button to sign up. One of the most important pieces of contact properties that you can include on a form is a write-in field that asks them a question about what's most important to you. Like in our particular context here at DCSMI, we're always asking what's the biggest challenge you're facing with marketing and sales. That does wonders for aggregating what people care about. It does wonders for putting information on their CRM records so you can personalize the sales process to what's top of mind for them. It's always super important when you're putting together these lead generation programs to anticipate what they want to do next. Throughout the full buyer's journey, to take them from awareness to consideration, and then consideration to decision, and decision to purchase. When you pair up a landing page with what's called a confirmation page, you have a unique opportunity to do the sales cycle acceleration to turn leads into opportunities. And what you'll see here on the screen is a confirmation page for a webinar. And you can see with the green arrow on the bottom, there's a couple of different options that can help accelerate someone to the natural suggested next step that someone may be interested in. So if you're looking to get more acceleration, that's super important. Obviously, chat bots and chats can be part of your lead generation strategy. Pop-ups used to have a bad stigma 10 years ago, but they came back in the last couple of years with a vengeance, and they can be super effective when deployed strategy for providing help in a way that's really relevant to who they are and what they care about. You can see a pop-up on the screen that replaces an entire conversion path offering a ebook. So pop-ups aren't necessarily the bad guys anymore. You'll actually see them when they're used responsibly to help with your lead generation. So I'm so glad that you're able to join us today for Data Center Lead Generation 301. We started out by recapping best practices around Data Center Lead Generation 101, using the right terminology so you don't confuse leads and sales opportunities, how to transform strangers into known leads, how to look at whether you and your team and your company need to reboot your positioning, what it takes to exchange value and put relationships into the relationship bank account before you try to draw on them, and how to turn your website into a lead generation factory based on the same mindset of having AI factories that are going to be dominating the data center industry in the coming years. If you have any questions, I'd encourage you to drop them into the chat pane, and I'll try to address as many of those as possible over the next few minutes. If we don't get to your individual question, we'll try to reach out to you within the next business day with some answers or at least some resources to point you in the right direction. So I'm going to start by scrolling through the list of questions here, and I'll go back and forth between the submitted questions that were live and the questions that were sent in ahead of time. So the first question is, what does it take to be more successful with market entry into a segment within the data center space? And I think this company looks like they do something facilities related, but it would be a very similar kind of playbook throughout technology companies and data center operators and even real estate and construction. So in terms of market entry, you don't know what you don't know. Your company probably isn't the stage where you have product market fit yet, PMF. You should be trying to get to product market fit as rapidly as possible, which means that you know exactly who your best clients are, you know what products and services they purchase from you, you know the price points, you know the frequency or duration, you know the sales cycle length. You figured a lot of these things out, and you're starting to see patterns. You'll start to see patterns in your case studies. That's how you'll know you're on the right track with your new market entry. And from there, you can typically build an ideal client profile, an ICP. Within there, hopefully, once you've identified your client profile, you can build a target account list of who you want to go after, and then figure out who the individual stakeholders are, what types of roles within those companies you need to be building relationship with. Those are your buyer personas, and at that point, you should be able to prioritize a primary buyer persona and a secondary buyer persona. All of this is incredibly important if you want to build a scalable lead generation engine that's effective within the data center industry. So in terms of market entry, get as close to the customers, the clients that you think you want as possible. There's a number of ways to do it. The traditional way of doing it is face-to-face at events, and that can certainly have its place, but it doesn't need to be the only place. I've seen a lot of people do events like this, where they ask a lot of questions, they do polls, they do surveys, they gather a lot of insight as part of their overall research process. I've seen people use podcasts as a great research tool where they're like triple dipping. They're building a relationship with someone who's a thought leader in their space. They're creating great evergreen content that they can share a lot of different ways that helps the guest to get found more readily, helps you to get found more readily, and positions you as a curator of excellent resources in the space. And then on top of that, because you're spending more time with people that look like the target customers that you're looking for, you're getting great unique customer insights that can feed into your overall product strategy. But make sure you're totally aligned and that you collaborate well, because there needs to be a good working relationship between the 4 or 5 different disciplines on your go-to-market team, from marketing to sales, from sales to customer success, from customer success to product, channel partnerships, and your executive sponsor. That's all super important. Okay, looks like we have time for 2 or 3 more questions. What can we do to sell more strategic, high-value sales? What can we do to get into more strategic, high-value sales? I think a lot of that depends on really understanding the job that you do for your customer. Product managers have this framework that they've been using for probably the better part of 10 or 15 years now, called a job to be done, JTBD. What does a job to be done mean? Well, this was a framework that was popularized by the late Clayton Christensen, who was a professor at Harvard Business School, and it was designed to help technology companies better understand what role they play. And it doesn't have to be limited to technology companies. He gives great examples of doing research with like McDonald's, a better understanding why people buy their milkshakes. But a lot of companies don't truly understand the job that they do for their clients. And as a result, their messaging, their sales strategy, their product marketing just falls completely flat. So if you're serious about unlocking strategic, higher value sales, it's really important that you figure out what's the biggest reason why new clients hire your company over other alternatives. This is tremendously important customer insight research. This can be dramatically improved by just spending more time with your best customers. Site visits, roundtables, focus groups, podcast interviews, and truly understanding all the different stakeholders that are involved with your product and service at this particular company. That's the most important way to unlock what it's going to take to get to more strategic, higher value sales within the company as a whole. And as I've mentioned earlier, the better job you can do with transforming your traditional sales teams that were focused on closing transactions to be seen more like $1,000 an hour Big Four enterprise consultants that provide enormous value. They're not just showing up and reading the slides. They're providing enormous value to helping to diagnose what's going on at particular prospects and helping coach the internal champion on bringing in all the other stakeholders and not only addressing their questions, but helping guide them through the journey that most companies similar to theirs go through and the stakeholders when these companies are going through, because you've seen the pattern recognition with other companies you work with. The more effectively your sales team can do this, the more effective, even your customer success team, your customer success managers, your account managers need to do this at like next level. So if you think of like your sales professionals, your account executives, your sales development reps as needing to show up like Big Four consultants, your CSMs, your account managers need to show up like the PhD version or like the MBA version of the Big Four consultant, where they're providing incredibly valuable consulting and insights that can help your prospects and help your customers and help your partners get more out of your platform, get more out of your data center technology, get more out of your facility solution, get more from what you do with real estate, what you do with construction, whatever your role is within if you visit DCSMI.com, you'll see under the Who We Help, we identify more than 50 distinct business models that are in the data center ecosystem, in addition to the data center operators. So the more you can understand what it is you really do, why they really select your company, who are the stakeholders that are involved in utilizing your product, what it takes to get from initial to intended to extended value. All of these are incredibly important to be able to accelerate leads into opportunities into new customers, and new customers into evangelists. I was interviewing the president of a mid-sized co-location company a couple of weeks ago for the podcast. I think his soundbite was like, "Smile and dial is dead." The real work for our sales team begins when a new customer signs up, because they can focus on getting to know the customer's environment even better, almost functioning like a fractional CTO. And then they can make all kinds of recommendations on how that new customer can get more value from our platform, which leads to natural cross-sell, upsell, expansion revenue type of opportunities. Let's see how we're doing on time. It's like we have time for one more question. This one is, how do we build brand awareness at the same time we're trying to improve lead generation? How do we improve brand awareness for our company at the same time we're trying to improve lead generation? The most important thing to keep in mind with brand awareness is brand is no longer something that should be decided unilaterally by your creative director. Sure, your creative director needs to provide input on consistency with your logo and your fonts and the hex codes, your RGB codes, whatever it is on your the colors that you use for your trade dress, your brand colors. But your brand today is so much more than that. Your brand is everything and anything that people say about your brand, that people say about your company and your team when you're not in the room. And given that you're no longer in the room for most of the buyer's journey, for 83% of that buyer's journey, our content and our events need to do the heavy lifting of portraying our brand in a positive light. The most effective way to do this, to show up and grow and improve your brand awareness, is to show up as a teacher, a trusted advisor, a subject matter expert, a thought leader, and a consultant, and not just be focused on the transaction. Because especially in any kind of recurring revenue business. We know the transaction is just the starting line anyway. But in today's environment where people no longer need to get information from your sales team, they can get it elsewhere. That's the new way of building a brand. So it looks like that's the final question that we're going to have time for today. I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute. We're all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals in the growth of the data center industry. I wish you tremendous success in using lead generation and sales cycle acceleration much more effectively to grow your business. If you have any follow-up questions following today's webinar, most of you likely have a confirmation email sitting in your inbox. You can feel free to reply to that. You can also visit our website at dcsmi.com, and in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll find a chat bubble where you can interact with a member of our team. I wish you great success in being able to capitalize on the enormous opportunities that are coming in the data center industry in the coming years as all of this digital infrastructure goes through once in multi-generation transformation. Let us know if you need any help figuring out how your company can fit into this and capitalize on it even better. I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI. I wish you great success. Enjoy the rest of your day and take care now.
The Data Center Go-to-Market podcast is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website that can be found at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that URL is www.dcsmi.com.